Odin could no longer sleep. Each night, as the stars traced slow arcs across Asgard's skies, he was visited by shadows that refused to fade with the dawn. They came not as whispers, but as dreadful visions, each more horrifying than the last. First, a massive, twisting serpent, its scales blacker than night and eyes glowing like molten gold, slithered across the edges of his mind. Then came the rotting corpse of a woman, her body torn between beauty and decay, weeping tears that scorched the ground. And finally a wolf, small at first, but growing larger with every passing second, sank its fangs into his heart. Odin woke from each nightmare gasping, drenched in sweat. But worst of all was the feeling that these visions were not dreams. They were warnings. For a time, Odin tried to convince himself they were just echoes of ancient fears. But deep down, the Allfather knew better. The images shared a thread, a sinister bond he could not ignore. Each one was tethered to a single inescapable name, Loki. The trickster god, his blood brother, had long been a source of chaos in Asgard. Odin had hoped marriage and fatherhood would tame him. But whispers from the 9 realms spoke of secrets, and secrets in Odin's experience always bore a terrible price. Driven by dread, Odin summoned his most trusted warriors, Thor, the god of thunder, and Tyr, the one-handed god of war. He told them of his dreams, of Loki's affair with the giantess Angerboda, and of the monstrous children born in secrecy. Odin ordered them to journey to Jotunheim to bring the offspring to Asgard. The time for waiting had ended. If fate would not be kind, then Odin would bend it to his will. The journey to Angerboda's lair was treacherous, veiled in endless twilight and cloaked in frost. But Thor and Tyr were gods, born of thunder and courage. When they reached the cave hidden beneath a mountain of ice, the air thickened with ancient magic. The ground trembled, and then it appeared. A snake, longer than a river and faster than lightning, lunged at them. Loki's firstborn, Jormungandr. Its breath was poison, its fangs dripping venom. Thor met the attack with his hammer, dodging death with divine grace, before wrapping the serpent in chains and binding it to a pine tree with roots deep in the icy earth. But before they could catch their breath, the second child emerged. She stepped from the shadows like a ghost. Half of her face was radiant, angelic even, but the other half had rotted to bone. This was hell. She did not fight. Instead, she simply looked at them with eyes full of sorrow, as flakes of dead skin crumbled from her limbs. Tyr moved to bind her, and she offered no resistance. There was something more terrifying in her silence than in 1,000 screams. Then came the final child, a small wolf cub with eyes that burned like stars. It growled, leapt, and clawed at Tyr's armor, but it was too small to pose any real threat. Tyr, amused and curious, gently subdued the creature and carried it back in the fold of his cloak. The 3 captives were returned to Asgard, their fates now entwined with the gods who feared them. When Odin laid eyes on them, he felt the same cold terror from his dreams crawl up his spine. They were just children, or so they appeared, but he knew with unshakable certainty that these were the very monsters that haunted his sleep. The serpent, the corpse, and the wolf. His nightmares made flesh. The Allfather wasted no time. He cast Jormungandr into the darkest ocean at the world's edge, where the serpent sank beneath the waves with a hiss that echoed into eternity. Then he sent Hel to Niflheim, deep beneath the roots of the World Tree, to rule over the dead in silence. But when it came to the wolf, Fenrir, Odin hesitated. The cub was already growing, feeding on the winds of Asgard, and learning faster than any beast should. Soon Fenrir stood taller than the tallest warrior, and more intelligent than most of them. He spoke in riddles, listened with wisdom, and watched the gods with eyes full of something uncanny. Tyr, in particular, was drawn to him. He would visit the wolf daily, sharing tales of battles and glory. Fenrir listened like a pupil, but behind his calm demeanor, a storm was brewing. Odin sensed the danger in the bond forming between Fenrir and Tyr. It was affection born in fire, destined to end in betrayal. The wolf was clever and proud, and soon too strong to ignore. So Odin crafted the strongest chains known to the gods, chains that had once bound giants and titans. He brought them to Fenrir with a challenge. Break them if you dare. Fenrir accepted, grinning like a thundercloud. With a single movement, he shattered them like twigs. Odin returned with stronger chains, ones that weighed as much as a mountain. This time, Fenrir hesitated, but Tyr's reassuring smile gave him confidence. Once again, the wolf roared, thrashed, and burst his bonds into dust. It was no longer a question of if Fenrir would become dangerous. He already was. Odin knew brute force would not work. He turned instead to the dwarves, masters of craft and cunning. He begged them to forge something unlike anything before, a chain that could not be broken. And the dwarves delivered. They called it the Gleipnir, and it looked like silk, light and harmless. But its ingredients were beyond comprehension. The sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the breath of a fish, and the roots of a mountain. Impossible things, woven into an impossible trap. And as Odin returned to Asgard with Gleipnir hidden in his hand, he wondered, would this truly be enough to bind fate? Or was he only feeding the fire that would consume him? From the moment Odin returned with Gleipnir, the mood in Asgard shifted. The golden halls of the gods, once filled with laughter and pride, now echoed with whispers and unease. The gods had seen Fenrir's power, had watched him break the unbreakable. He was no longer a beast. They spoke of him as something more, something dangerous, something destined. But Tyr did not flinch. Day after day, he visited the wolf. They walked beneath the stars, sparred beside the river, and shared words that meant more than either would admit. Tyr had never fathered a child, but in Fenrir he saw a soul that could be guided, perhaps even redeemed. The gods saw a monster. Tyr saw potential, yet even he could not silence the shadow of prophecy that crept behind each of Fenrir's footsteps. Odin summoned the gods for one final attempt. This time, they would use Gleipnir, not through force but through deception. They would treat it like a game, a challenge, something to pique the wolf's pride. Odin explained every detail with precision, but none of them were willing to face Fenrir directly. None, except Tyr. When the gods approached Fenrir, he greeted them with a wary grin. He was no longer the playful cub that once nipped at Tyr's armor. Now he stood taller than the tallest god, his fur gleaming like shadowed steel, and his voice deep as thunder. Odin stepped forward and revealed Gleipnir, laughing as if it were all in jest. "A thread," he said, "so fine it can't possibly hold you. Prove us wrong, great Fenrir. Show us your strength." Fenrir's eyes narrowed. His gaze flicked to the silky chain, then back to Odin. Something felt wrong. He could smell fear, hidden behind smiles. His heart thudded. This was no ordinary test. The wolf had always trusted his instincts, and they now screamed one word: trap. With a low growl, Fenrir made a demand. If this was truly a game, then someone would need to prove their faith. "I will let you bind me," he said, "but only if one of you places their hand in my mouth. If you lie, if you betray me, then I will bite." The gods recoiled. Even Thor stepped back, gripping his hammer. But Tyr, oh, faithful Tyr, stepped forward. No words, no hesitation. He met Fenrir's eyes and nodded. Slowly he extended his arm and placed his hand between the beast's jaws. A moment passed, then two. Fenrir lay down, and the gods moved fast. Gleipnir was wrapped around his limbs, tied to boulders enchanted with runes of eternity. And when they gave the signal, the trap was sprung. Fenrir howled. He twisted, pulled, bit at the air. But Gleipnir held. The chain that felt like thread gripped him like a vice, and the more he struggled, the tighter it grew. Fenrir's howl turned to something worse, a cry of betrayal. He had trusted Tyr, he had believed him, and now he had been caged like an animal. Tyr did not look away. He did not beg for mercy. He stood firm, even as tears welled in the corners of his eyes. Fenrir met his gaze one last time and bit down. The sound echoed across the 9 realms. Tyr did not scream. He did not fall. He simply pulled back what was left of his arm and stepped away. Fenrir writhed in fury. Blood poured from his mouth and rage from his soul. "You will all regret this," he growled. "I may be bound, but your fate is sealed. When my time comes, I will rise, I will hunt, and I will tear Odin's throat from his neck." But Odin did not flinch. He lifted Tyr's fallen sword and jammed it deep between the wolf's jaws. Fenrir snapped, but the blade held his mouth wide open. Saliva poured from his maw, forming a furious river that drowned the valley beneath them. Still, the wolf was not dead, just bound, temporarily. The gods left the valley in silence. Odin alone remained, watching the chained beast struggle against fate. He did not speak. He did not celebrate. In his heart, he knew this was not a victory. It was a delay. As days passed, the consequences unfolded like cracks in glass. Beneath the oceans, Jormungandr grew, his body encircling the world like a living noose. Deep in the underworld, Hel sat upon her throne of bone, building her army of the forgotten. And in the mountains where Fenrir lay, the earth trembled a little more each day, as the wolf tugged, stretched, and snarled against the binds that tried to hold destiny itself. Tyr was never the same. The gods hailed him as a hero, but he never returned to battle. He avoided celebrations, avoided the feasts. Instead, he wandered alone across the edges of the world, haunted by the look in Fenrir's eyes and the moment trust shattered into vengeance. And Odin. Odin dreamed again. But this time, the dreams were clearer. He saw fire in the skies, blood in the water, and the sound of howling louder than thunder. No longer visions, no longer warnings, but promises. The question that lingered in the golden halls of Asgard was not if Fenrir would break free. It was when. Time, for gods, moves differently. Years pass like falling leaves. Yet even in their eternal halls, the gods of Asgard could feel a storm approaching. The winds grew colder, the skies darkened more often. And though they danced and drank as they always had, something had changed. Fear had taken root, not openly, but deep within. It began with whispers. Dwarves in Nidavellir spoke of earthquakes felt beneath mountains, long thought immovable. Fishermen in Midgard returned with torn nets and stories of a great serpent brushing against the ocean floor. The dead in Helheim stirred, restless and hungry, and always, always came the howl, carried on the winds, rising from the valley where Fenrir lay. It was distant at first, but with each moon, it grew closer. Tyr watched from afar. He had grown old, older than any god should. He bore no weapons now, only the weight of his choice. He alone understood what was coming, not because he'd seen visions, but because he had seen Fenrir's eyes, The wolf had not forgotten. Tyr knew. The chains would not hold forever. One night the howling stopped. The silence that followed was worse than sound. The gods awoke to find Gleipnir unraveling like thread kissed by fire. The enchanted rocks had cracked. The river of saliva ran dry, and the valley where Fenrir had once been was empty. Panic spread like wildfire through the halls of Asgard. Odin, though ancient and wise, felt the brittle bones of destiny tightening around his throne. He knew what this meant. Ragnarök, the end of all things. The prophecy long whispered, now roaring into reality. Across the world, chaos awakened. From the sea, Jormungandr arose, his body so vast it split the oceans. He towered over mountains, his breath thick with venom, poisoning sky and soil alike. Thor mounted his chariot and rode into the storm, lightning arcing from his hammer, knowing it would be his final battle. In Helheim, the gates burst open. Hel led her army of the dead across the rainbow bridge. Warriors long lost, their eyes hollow and armor cracked, marched under her silent command. Heimdall blew the Gjallarhorn, its sound shaking all 9 realms. But it was Fenrir who led the charge. His body had grown monstrous, fur bristling like spears, jaws wide enough to swallow suns. He ran faster than the wind, past fields of flame, toward one target, Odin. The Allfather met him on the battlefield beneath a sky choked with ash. His spear, Gungnir, shimmered with ancient magic. But Odin knew, in his heart, that prophecy had never lied. He had tried to escape it, through chains, through lies, through sacrifice. But fate is a river. It does not stop. It only floods. The two forces collided. Odin thrust his spear. Fenrir leapt. The blade struck true, but not deep enough. The wolf clamped down, his fangs tearing through armor and bone. With a sickening crunch, Fenrir devoured the king of gods. The battlefield froze. For one heartbeat, the universe held its breath. Then came Thor, thunder in his wake, meeting Jormungandr at the edge of the world. The two titans clashed, the ground splitting beneath them. Hammer met fang, storm met poison, and at last, Thor crushed the serpent's skull. But as victory came, so did venom. It flooded his veins, and the god of thunder fell beside the beast he had slain. The world shook, the sky burned, the rainbow bridge shattered, and amid it all, Tyr watched, tears blurring his vision. He had once believed in justice, in law, in choices. But now, watching Fenrir stand over Odin's broken crown, he saw the truth. This was never about good or evil. It was about fate, relentless, cruel, and unchangeable. But Fenrir, he did not roar in triumph. He stood still, blood dripping from his jaws, eyes locked with tears one last time. And in that moment, the wolf blinked, not with rage, but something else. Regret? As fire consumed Asgard, and the gods fell one by one, a single seedling sprouted beneath the world tree. Somewhere far from war, 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, emerged from the shadows, survivors destined to repopulate the world. The cycle would begin again. The gods would fade into myth, and Fenrir's name would echo for eternity, not just as the destroyer of gods, but as the creature who proved that even chains cannot bind fate. And so the question remains, was Fenrir ever truly the villain? Or was he merely the consequence of gods who feared their own reflection? Let the audience decide. Was Odin's fear justified, or did he create the very fate he tried to escape? What do you believe? Let us know in the comments.